Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner. Joining me on today's show is Mike Gasly, who's the Interim Budget Director. Thank you for joining me today, Mike.
You're welcome, and it's glad to be back in Winchester Hall again.
Well, I'm glad to have you here for the first historic budget under our new form of government charter. It's a little bit different process than what we had when we had the commissioner form of government. You want to start off by sharing a little bit of information about the process itself?
Well, I think the process started 2 weeks after we both walked in the door, right after December 1st, and we have to have a meeting, a public hearing to discuss the base budget. And at that point, the base budget was about $3.2 million in the hole. And so we had to find money to resolve that problem, which we did. And then we spent the January, February time period talking with different division directors and basically discussed what they needed, because a lot happened over the last 4 years, and there were a lot of positions either eliminated or outsourced, and we had to discuss that. So in March, we were prepared to go back to the public with the appeals that we were presented to get the public's comments on those appeals.
And that was a little bit different, because in the past we did have a public process to look through appeals, but we didn't have a public hearing specifically on budget requests or budget appeals, as we call them. So that was a little bit different.
It was, and we certainly took that input into consideration and then continued to meet as a budget committee, which included Doug Browning, the CAO, and Kelly Weaver, my assistant, because she's the CIP expert here in the county. So we went through the operating and CIP appeals and the budgets, tried to keep all the schools on time as much as we could, tried to honor as many appeals as we have. And it was nice that we were able to find enough revenues to fund some of that. The budget grew by about $10 million, which was less than 2%. So that's commendable that we were able to still fund some of these things with a small growth in the budget.
Well, I think there's good news and bad news in the budget. The good news was that property tax revenue and income taxes are growing, and that reflects a recovering economy, slow but steady growth in the economy. We did have to cover a $10.4 million deficit inherited from the prior administration when one-time money was taken from reserves to support ongoing expenses. So to keep those expenses ongoing, we had to fund that first. So that was one of our initial challenges. Fortunately, we do see some revenue growth, so that helped us to have a little bit of money to meet some of the needs of the county. I do think one of the big challenges was maintaining our school construction program. As you noted, when Mike mentions the CIP, he's talking about the capital improvement program, because those projects went up significantly versus last year. Literally, the top three priorities went up $23 million. So that was a challenge, and certainly I appreciate your effort and the effort of Kelly Weaver to help shift projects around to make sure that we could meet those school construction needs. So now I've presented the budget, the county council will consider it, and the budget will be adopted by May 25th per the charter. Actually a little bit earlier this year, since May 25th is Memorial Day. So we'll wait and see what the county council is going to do with this over the next several weeks. I think it's important to talk about some of the mandates we had, both in terms of making sure we fund MOE, teacher pensions, and Board of Elections. Can you speak to those three things a little bit?
Right. Well, with the Board of Education, the MOE requirement, due to the increase in the enrollment, a maintenance of effort requirement, was that we add $1 million to their budget. So in addition, the state now mandates we cover a portion of the pension, and that was an additional $1.4 million. So immediately we added $2.4 million to their budget. This budget also is giving another $4.2 million to the Board of Education. Also, the Board of Elections. The cost of going back in time to paper ballots is going to cost us over $400,000 with the Board of Elections. And also we have some of the lowest paid election judges in the state of Maryland, so we did bump up their pay by, I think, a total of $25,000 spread over hundreds of election judges that are out there. So.
Well, I do want to share with the public some of the key highlights or accomplishments in the proposed budget. As you noted, funding for education for the first time in 6 years is above the bare minimum required by law, which is maintenance of effort. So it's $4.2 million above maintenance of effort. But I would note when you add the required funding for maintenance of effort, our share of teacher pensions, and the funding above maintenance of effort, the Board of Education or our public schools does get well over half of the new funding that we had available this year. We do add 4 sheriff deputies and 10 firefighters in public safety, and that's in direct response to meeting the growing call volumes for service that we have in our community, and to address some other issues, like the sheriff's office is working very hard to address the heroin problem that has been a growing concern in our community and throughout the state of Maryland. In fire, we're also have moved up the replacement of the burn building, which was very important for training and recertification of both our volunteers and our career firefighters. And we did that by eliminating the move of logistics from its current location to the public safety training facility, something we really didn't feel that we needed to do. So we changed priorities a little bit. I also was able to fund a few things that I talked about in my campaign, like supporting Meals on Wheels. We have expanded routes for Meals on Wheels, and the proposed budget does include a position to support the coordination of Meals on Wheels volunteers and some other programs in the Department of Aging. There's also funding to support the Agricultural Economic Development Specialist position that had gone vacant and was very important to our agricultural community. So there's a number of things that I was pleased to support that were issues that were talked about in the campaign.
Also, grant and aid, kind of related to these public services. I mean, the restoration of $250,000 for nonprofit agencies in the county. You know, that I know they're going to be very appreciative of adding that back in. We've continued to do some of those services that we did many years ago through some MOUs, some memorandums of understanding with different agencies, but to put another $250,000 back into the process again to help those agencies is really going to be well received.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because the county has partnered with our nonprofit human service agencies for at least 3 decades, maybe longer. I don't know if you can remember further back than 3 decades. But the prior administration did zero out much of that funding support. And so we're going to restart a grant application process, which will happen in the fall. And we do ask people to tell us what they're going to do with the money to prove that they have the ability and capability to deliver that service. And we hold them accountable for the expenditure of funding. So in the past, we've had a review process that has included people from outside the county so that we do have kind of an independent review of that process. So I think that's important. I also think it's important to let our viewers know that there's no tax increases proposed in the budget. We did put it together on existing property tax and income tax rates. We are continuing to fund our municipalities for their share of what we call tax equity. And we're following the same fiscal policies that have been in place for a long time. We are very conservative in our budget and finance, and we want to maintain our great AAA bond rating. Some people ask me, have you planned for pensions and the retirement of your workforce? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, the retirement fund is fully funded at like 91, 92%, which you won't find that in the state of Maryland anywhere. In fact, I think the state government's funded in the 50% range. As far as health retirement, we call it OPEB, other post-employment benefits for our retired employees that still receive health from the county. Once again, we are funded well over the minimum rate for that, and that continues to be a great program, for those retirees.
I wanted to talk a little bit about privatization and the situation with fleet. Can you talk a little bit about what we were able to accomplish by reviewing privatization contracts, particularly in public works?
Yes, we found that, for instance, snow removal, we found that in fringe areas of the county it worked pretty well, but then there were other areas where we could actually be more efficient with that. So what we've done is reduce some of those contracts, and I believe we've increased our workforce in the DPW area, Public Works area, by about 9. And that
With
no cost to the county, no cost to the taxpayers to bring that back, that service back. Deer carcass was one of those areas that was talked about a lot. We'd have someone go out to see that there was a carcass. We'd call someone and remove it, and then we'd go back to make sure they removed it. Not very efficient.
No.
So now those are the type of services we've looked at, and we found that it's much more efficient to do some of these in-house.
Right. The county's always used some contract services, and that makes sense for functions that we don't do over and over and over again. But generally, if there's some kind of a service or function that we provide on a regular basis, we do it cheaper, and we do it more effective in-house. So there's a lot of factors that go into whether we should privatize. We are recreating our what's called our culvert and headwall crew, which really does culvert pipe replacement. They do some bridge repair and maintenance, and we have costed that out multiple times over the year, and it's always been much cheaper to do in-house. We did have a $500,000 contract last year, and we could have done that work in-house for $140,000, saving $360,000. So we are bringing some of these services back in-house, and we are going to save money. The same thing with our fleet reserves. There were $6.5 million was taken out of fleet reserves last year, and we really need to replace it. The changes in the fleet reserve have increased maintenance costs by $1.6 million, far negating any savings we might have seen. So that's something we're going to have to fix, and we'll have to fix that over the next several years. So I want to thank you for being here. I think we put together, with your help and all of our division directors, an outstanding budget. I think it's sensible. It's responsible. I think it meets many of the needs in our community. It will ensure that we have great schools, a safe community, and that we meet the needs of our growing senior population and provide a high quality of life for our residents. So I want to thank you and Kelly Weaver for all your work, all our division directors, and we do certainly encourage the citizens of our county to read the budget. I think it's one of the most important things we do together as a community, because our budget reflects our priorities and our values. You can find that on the county government webpage, and we're always open to hearing your comments by either phone or by email. So we look forward to continuing to engage the public as we move forward with this year's budget and next year's budget. So thank you for joining us today, Mike. Thank you to our viewing audience. I hope you learned a little bit about our budget today, and we look forward to hearing what you think about it.